Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of DC Studios' Creature Commandos Episode 1, The Collywobbles, and Episode 2, The Tourmaline Necklace. This 7-episode animated series is technically the first new entry of the DC universe overseen by James Gunn and Peter Safran, leading to James Gunn's Superman film coming in July 2025, and Gunn's Peacemaker series Season 2 coming in August. So I'm going to break down all the Easter eggs in these first two episodes as we embark upon this new age of a DCU. We open with the official new DC Studios title bumper showing a classic Superman breaking out of chains. This showed up before the Super/Man Christopher Reeve documentary, which James Gunn considered really the overture to his upcoming DC slate. The Superman here is in his original suit design from Joe Shuster's 1938 Action Comics #1 cover art, with the S emblem with the yellow border, a bit of blue tones in his hair, and trunks so shaded and shadowed that they initially appear all black. Shuster didn't add the black field to the chest emblem until Superman #4 in 1940. This design also inspired the Max Fleischer Superman animation, but the hair and face of this Superman are thinner and just more penciled like Shuster's original design, and I love it. Episode 1 opens in Belle Reve Correctional Center, which has the same layout as what we saw in 2021's The Suicide Squad that Gunn directed. That film was somewhat connected to Zack Snyder's DCEU, as it featured the returns of Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, Viola Davis's Amanda Waller, Joel Kinnaman's Rick Flag Jr., and Jai Courtney's Captain Boomerang, and we are greeted by the news service GBS, which was also in Snyder's DCEU, the Galaxy Broadcasting System. This newscaster is voiced by CNN's Jake Tapper. He reports on the Sons of Themyscira invading Pokolistan. In the comics, the Sons of Themyscira were the male sons of the Amazonians who were abandoned by their mothers at birth. Notably, they had some genuine gripes with Amazonians, as they are basically abandoned children and eventually get massacred by them. Here, they just seem to be regular human guys with some sus yet familiar politics. Pokolistan is a fictional country in the DC comics. It's a fragment broken off from the Czech Republic, first introduced in Superman the Man of Steel #109 in 2001. Cersei is a Wonder Woman villain from the DC comics, known for several sorceress abilities, but might be best known for turning people into human/animal hybrids, her Ani-Men. And yes, there's a Marvel version of Ani-Men that was referenced recently by James Gunn in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. The newscaster, voiced by Tapper, calls her a reputed sorceress, despite the fact that she's definitely casting spells in the B-roll here, and says that she claims to be the rightful ruler of Themyscira, referring to the country as the perhaps mythical, perhaps real, all-female island nation. Part of Gunn's upcoming slate is Paradise Lost, a live-action series set on Themyscira. It sounds like the outside world here still doubts its existence, and we have to remember that despite the fact that this is an animated version of all of this, because they wanted to be able to depict non-human characters, and characters like Dr. Phosphorus are just much easier to render in animation than they are in live action, the rules of this world apply to the rules of the live action world that Gunn is still building out. So we can imagine Rick Flag Sr. would be played by Frank Grillo in the same way that Amanda Waller is still played by Viola Davis. And the fact that Alan Tudyk is playing Clayface on this show might indicate that Alan Tudyk is going to be playing Clayface in the live action version of the character in any future Batman movie. Cersei's Metropolis PD number is number 42569. I feel like someone's birthday might be April 25th, 1969. The Sons of Themyscira fire an RPG at a gas station with Cyrillic letters suggesting Pokolistan is a former Soviet republic in this world. The letters here translate to something like gas station, and notice how the cost per liter seems low depending on what the local currency and inflation is, but many former Soviet republics like Kazakhstan in our world are rich in petroleum, and that is what Amanda Waller says is the case for Pokolistan. The douchey sons flanking Cersei have some, let's call them J6-esque masks. The one with the skull mouth might be a nod to El Diablo, who we saw in the David Ayer version of Suicide Squad. They interview someone by the name No Soy Boy 86. He's voiced by Alan Tudyk. And Critical Skeptic Facts of Her Feelings 91. He's voiced by Tony Cavallero, who's a hilarious Groundlings alum whom you might know from Righteous Gemstones. This broadcast is watched by Rick Flag Sr., who's voiced by Frank Grillo, and Amanda Waller, voiced as always by Viola Davis. Rick Sr. is the father of Rick Flag Jr., who is played by Joel Kinnaman in the 2021 The Suicide Squad and the David Ayer Suicide Squad from 2016. In the most recent film, he was killed by Peacemaker. The elevator goes down past the basement levels to at least 2 levels of XX. Flag says,
I thought Congress put a stop to all Task Force X activities since your daughter outed you.
This is a reference to the end of Peacemaker Season 1, in which Leota, revealed to be, spoiler warning, Amanda Waller's daughter, leaked all of her mother's secrets. We learn now that this led to government regulation, but only for Task Force X using humans and metahumans, but doesn't cover this gray area loophole of using what Amanda Waller considers to be non-humans. In the DC Comics, the Creature Commandos were a military squad from World War II, introduced in Weird War Tales number 93 in 1980, made up of a human leader, Lieutenant Matthew Shreve, GI Robot, 2 different versions, Jake and Jake 2, and a Gorgon named Dr. Mira Rhodes, aka Dr. Medusa, as well as a werewolf named Warren Griffith, and Private Elliot Lucky Taylor, who survived stepping on a landmine but now, as a result, looks like Frankenstein's monster, as well as Sergeant Velcro, who, like a vampire, can change into a bat and requires human blood to sustain his life. The team was reintroduced in a modern comic miniseries in 2000 with a few new members, but the version in this series seems mostly based on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. run, which introduced Father Time, who led S.H.I.E.L.D., as well as Dr. Ray Palmer, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Dr. Nina Mazursky, the vampire Vincent Velcro, Warren the Werewolf again, the mummy Kalis, and Matthew Shreve. James Gunn, though, has tweaked the lineup here. We meet this lineup starting with the Bride, who's voiced by Indira Varma, who played Ilaria Sand in Game of Thrones and her role in Obi-Wan Kenobi. Her dossier reads type corpse, origin unknown, but that origin is revealed in episode 2, number 154372. The Bride of Frankenstein was a member of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. starting in 2011. She reads Young Love magazine, the headline being my ex is toxic but he's hot, which is a pretty great joke because her ex would be Erik Frankenstein, someone who is quite toxic but known for being engulfed in flames. Fire bad. Next, Dr. Phosphorus, voiced by Alan Tudyk, who will also voice Clayface later in the series, and he voiced Clayface in the Harley Quinn animated series. Dr. Phosphorus is a lesser-known Batman villain who got his powers from a crack in a radioactive power plant he tried to build in Gotham City. I love how the animators incorporate the Kirby Crackle effect into the character's flaming skin. Kirby Crackle refers to the artistic convention originating with Jack Kirby, in which a field of black is used to represent negative space around unspecified kinds of energy. Here, his dossier reads 565477A. James Gunn has also added, of course, Weasel to this lineup. Weasel voiced by Sean Gunn, who also voices G.I. Robot. Weasel escaped on Corto Maltese in the post-credit scene of 2021's The Suicide Squad, and Waller does mention Project Starfish here, referring to that incident with Starro. Waller put Weasel initially on the distraction team, the team that was meant to die, and Weasel couldn't even swim. He coughs up and licks back up one of the Jenga bricks. Waller says Weasel has what it takes to survive, and Rick Sr. makes a face, recalling that Rick Jr. did not survive this mission. Rick Sr. moves on to the next member, G.I. Robot. Now in the comics, there have been 6 individual G.I. robots. This one has a 2 on his helmet, so it might be Jake 2, who spent time with the Creature Commandos, but was actually the 4th G.I. robot. James Gunn has said that this summer's Superman film has been done with the same technology that they could use to portray G.I. Robot in live action. Again, just because this is animated doesn't mean that it doesn't matter to the world that James Gunn is building. G.I. Robot sees a swastika in the Jenga bricks, even connecting dots on long flat pieces that don't have proper segments to form the symbol from his perspective, which is such a funny detail that just shows that this guy is gonna reach to see Nazi enemies wherever he can. G.I. Robot's dossier appears to be in binary computer code from like an Alan Turing era World War II computing device. And lastly, Nina Mazursky, voiced by Zoe Chow, a Gillman/mermaid hybrid. Her dossier reads, type, is this a fish? Waller names the group Task Force M, and Project M was the name of the program that created the Creature Commandos in the original 1980 comics. The opening credits also list David Harbour as Erik Frankenstein. We'll meet him later. James Gunn also puts an animated version of himself in this opening sequence as he's writing a script page. My man, come on, I love you, but you gotta admit, this is a bit vain. I mean, at least the version of Matt Groening in The Simpsons is like a drunk old coot who licks shot glasses and fires a magnum at the camera crew. But if you look closely, James has on his laptop a final draft layout showing the final scene of every episode. In this case, it's the scene that introduces Frankenstein, and we see him writing, tears fill his eyes, and Frankenstein saying, my bride. On the Osprey, Weasel has to be strapped down because remember, in the Project Starfish mission, he nearly drowned when he jumped off. The song we hear is My Gypsy Autopilot by Gogol Bordello. Gogol Bordello is an American punk rock band from Manhattan composed of musicians from around the world whose songs are inspired by Romani and Ukrainian music. It seems like James Gunn used them to include songs in several episodes. The royal security escorts them, and while they drive through the slums, the palace is gilded and opulent, which is sadly the case in many former Soviet republics like Turkmenistan. The successive portraits of past royal families look very inbred and rough, including even their dog. This recalls a visual gag in Pixar's WALL-E, the successive generations of Axiom captains who transition from photorealistic to animated and flabby. They meet Princess Ilana Rostovic, voiced by Maria Bakalova, another collaborator of James Gunn's, as she voiced Cosmo, the space dog, in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Rick Sr. is so smitten with Ilana that he doesn't realize how invasive it is that she knows his middle name is, weirdly, Bill, not William. I'm thinking she might be like a villain of this show. Keep an eye on her. Everybody's phone is basically a fancy camera, and at this point, we've all got thousands of photos of loved ones and major moments that just, sit on your phone. Aura frames change that. They're digital frames that let you easily share unlimited photos and videos up to 30 seconds long. Aura frames also have smart curation tools built in to help you find your best photos, avoiding duplicate and blurry shots. Plus, you can change photos, view details, and share with your family and friends easily using the touch bar controls. Aura digital photo frames offer the highest resolution resolution display on the market. The Carver matte frame was named the #1 digital frame by Wirecutter and also one of Oprah's favorite things. It has a 10.1-inch display with an 89-degree viewing angle plus an auto dimmer to match the brightness of whatever room it's in. And Aura frames make great gifts. You can use a QR code on the back of the box to load photos onto a frame before it's opened. That way, the second it's plugged in, your Aura frame is ready to go. We put photos of our favorite Chihuahua Tilda into a frame to give to her owner, and it was a huge success. Save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames by using promo code Rockstars at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code Rockstars. This deal is exclusive to our viewers, so get yours right now in time for the holidays. Terms and conditions apply. All of the Chief Guard's references are dated since this country just gets its culture from the Western world pretty late. He references the Jamie Kennedy experiment, the Super Bowl shuffle, what's up, and where's the beef? And each of these things are just like from completely different decades. I mean, where's the beef is very old. Super Bowl shuffle was like from the 80s. I love how all the members of the team eat differently. Weasel houses the entire turkey. Dr. Phosphorus sizzles his meat and then bites and tosses it. The bride just chugs the wine. GI Robot, of course, eats nothing. And Nina floats some broccoli up to her mouth. This episode's title, The Collywobbles, comes up here.
But just seeing it is enough to give me the collywobbles. Yeah.
So this episode is really just referring to how blinded Rick Flag Sr. is by just the beauty and the pomp here. G.I. Robot tells Nina,
G.I. Robot has been waiting for a friend to kill Nazis with for 74 years, 23 days, and 52 minutes.
So World War II ended in 1947, and this show takes place 2 years after the Suicide Squad. No matter how you do the math here, G.I. Robot continued to kill Nazis for several years after the war, and you know what? That tracks. I bet this dude was piling up bodies in Argentina. In the comics, the Jake versions of G.I. Robot were actually created by Professor Mazursky, who was Nina's father. She later tells the bride that her father was a scientist, but nothing like Victor Frankenstein. So G.I. Robot might actually be bonding with like his sister here in a way. Princess Alana disrobes and tries to make a move on Rick Sr., but he rebuffs her and leaves G.I. Robot to guard the door, probably because he's the only one of them with no sex drive. And G.I. Robot just declares how many Nazis he killed in each month of World War II. June 1944, Normandy, 38 dead Nazis. September 1944, the Battle of Hurtgen Forest, 92 dead Nazis. October 1944, the Battle of Aachen, 14 Nazis. So that means G.I. Robot was part of the Normandy invasion and then pushed toward Germany. Hurtgen Forest was 12 miles outside of the city of Aachen, so it's possible that he just fought in all of these battles. The bride hails a taxi and gives the driver directions in the native language. Yeah, that last word was definitely Frankenstein. She's telling him to go to Victor Frankenstein's mansion. Meanwhile, Dr. Phosphorus goes through all of Rick's stuff, and when he's caught, he looks over to see Rick Sr.'s bulge, and then eyes appears. Like John Cena and Peacemaker, Rick Sr. is just a jack dude of a certain age sporting white briefs. The song that starts playing here is Gogo Bordello's Mala Vida. They fight, and it's pretty great action animation. Dr. Phosphorus removes both gloves to spread as much fire as possible, causing them to crash down into the kitchen, and Rick, after burning his body on both Dr. Phosphorus and then his hands on the stove, smartly pops on an oven mitt to slam Doc's head. And I love this detail. Dr. Phosphorus grabs a measuring cup of water and I think quickly superheats it before splashing it on Rick's face because he can hear a little sizzle sound as it's boiling. Across the street from the Frankenstein mansion, the neighbor woman calls Erik Frankenstein, and a shirtless Zac Efron is her background wallpaper. There was some speculation before Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 that James Gunn might have been considering Zac Efron for Adam Warlock, and Gunn very aggressively shot it down as nonsense. Now our researcher Noah translated the Cyrillic letters here on the phone context. The first one is Irina Dimitrova, then Peter Dobrev, then Ivan Filipov. There's actually a Russian writer by this name, and then the fourth one is Erik Frankenstein. And then Costa Kazarov. Eric answers while he's on a yacht, and the shirt he's wearing kind of looks like Quagmire's shirt from Family Guy, or maybe he's trying to go for Dale from Rescue Rangers. The song over the credits is Jodan Vina by Korblekani, which is a Finnish folk music band. Okay, on to episode 2, The Tourmaline Necklace. We open in 1831 over segmented body parts that would be pieced together to form the bride, taken from several corpses. Erik Frankenstein is demanding a wife.
Shall each man find a wife for his bosom, and each beast have his mate, and I be alone?
This is a direct quote from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus, published in 1818. Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster were introduced into pop culture from Mary Shelley's novel, which was was considered historically the first horror novel. The monster character of Frankenstein was brought into DC Comics in 1948 in Detective Comics number 135 by Edmund Hamilton and Bob Kane. Batman Comics used a lot of public domain figures for the Rogues Gallery. There's been a few different versions of Frankenstein in DC Comics over the decades, and the version for the Creature Commandos is likely more based on the versions first introduced in 2005 by Grant Morrison and Dub Mankey, who would go on to be a member of the Creature Commandos and Shade. Eric threatens to kill Victor's wife. In Mary Shelley's original story, the creature does kill Victor's wife, Elizabeth, on their wedding night by strangling her. Eric angrily slams the lab tables and one severed head rolls on the ground. This will be the head that he picks up as part of the bride's future face. And notice the skin is lacerated on the exact diagonal where the second patch of skin will later have to connect to form the rest of her face, explaining that discoloration. For the opening credits of episode 2, the script page that James Gunn finishes writing is once again the final shot of this episode, when the bride bleeds out and Nina says, "Go yourself," and we see his exposition that he writes, the butt of a gun coming at her face. Ilana nurses Rick Sr.'s burns and wounds, getting him to disrobe. Again, I don't trust Princess Ilana, especially considering how much her family benefits from this insane wealth gap with the rest of the population and whatever is going on with her aging mother. Back in the flashback, Eric holds up a bouquet of daisies. Later, we see him extending just one to the bride, which is a nod to the 1931 Boris Karloff scene in the Frankenstein film when the girl Maria gives the monster a daisy before he throws her in a lake. James Gunn loves this moment and referenced it with Groot with the little girl on Nowhere in 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy. Victor, voiced by Peter Serafinowicz, has also worked with James Gunn in the past in 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy as part of the Nova Corps. Victor explains that unlike most newborns who had 9 months to acquaint themselves with existence in their mother's womb, the bride went from nothing to something in an instant, so this is more of a shock. And she imprints on Victor with his gentle caress, but then Eric scares her. In 1935's The Bride of Frankenstein, the bride there too initially rejects Frankenstein and clings to Henry. Like in the movie Poor Things, Victor teaches Bride how to speak words like apple and hat, and he gives her the titular tourmaline necklace. The sons of Themyscira and Circe hear about the address, and Circe tosses her crushed beer can, and we match cut on a bloody bandage going in the bin in the bathroom. We find out Rick Sr. toured in Desert Storm, and he gives in. The song that plays while they hook up is Raise the Dead by Caravan of Thieves, a gypsy swing band from Connecticut. Dr. Phosphorus tells the guard outside to give Flag at least 30 seconds to finish, and it seems like he can understand Weasel's grunts here, which reminds me of the relationship between Rocket and Groot, how Rocket can just kind of understand what I am Groot means. As Frankenstein's frustration at the bride's rejection of him grows, he starts choking Victor. This was the creature's classic move in Mary Shelley's novel, and I love the framing of the shot on the ground with Victor's broken glasses in the foreground. After Eric runs away, when Victor teaches Bride wooden horse, he pretends to have a mustache.
I am a silly, mustachioed man.
Yes, doesn't he look rather like the palace guard? Circe attacks Bride, and the music here is Start Wearing Purple by Gogol Bordello, again starts playing. And the song Wearing Purple is a phrase that the singer would tell his girlfriend when they were fighting, as they had a next door neighbor who was a little crazy and always wore purple. Bride uses her impressive strength to lay out the sons of Themyscira. On the balcony, we see Victor had his family crest, a coat of arms that includes the Cados's staff, a symbol that means physician here. As Circe and the bride fight, Bride is brought back to the memory of having sex with Victor, and there is some nip here. So obviously, Max ain't afraid to show nudity in this show. When Bride was first brought to life in this same lab, she coughed up bile. Now she spits up blood. Bride kicks Circe's groin and cracks her belt crystal, and Circe transfigures the bride's arms into wavy balloons, and she bleeds into the rain puddle and remembers the moment Eric Frankenstein killed Victor. They fight, and she kicks him into the fire. Fire bad. And then American Wedding by Gogol Bordello starts playing over this great montage of Eric and Bride throughout history and around the world. Starting with 1852 in Paris, he offers her a single daisy like the 1931 Boris Karloff Frankenstein flower exchange. 1880, an American Western saloon. Notice how Frankenstein is dressed like Clint Eastwood in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. 1895 in the Sahara Desert. Then 1912 underwater, they're wearing old school diving outfits. 1912 underwater, were they on the Titanic and there were diving suits that they like tumbled into the water wearing? 1923 at a Jazz Age burlesque show. 1941 World War II, and hey, we gotta wonder if they might have crossed paths with G.I. Robot. 1964 on top of a bus, and to me that kind of looks like in Hollywood. 1991, they're in a club called the Reptile Room, and I think this might be a nod to the Viper Room, which is a Sunset Strip club where River Phoenix died in 1993. And by the way, I made a whole video on this channel, Elseworlding, about Tobey Maguire's career based on that night, and all of you hated it. And then on the stage, an animated cameo from Eugene Hutz himself, the lead singer of Gogol Bordello, and we see how Eric Frankenstein's shirt is the same one Rick Flag Jr. wore in The Suicide Squad, except Eric's was black and Rick's was yellow, and it features a bunny with a sign saying obstacles are opportunities in Portuguese. Then they're on Wall Street at the New York Stock Exchange, where it's like very 80s Gordon Gekko. Then in the Victorian age, and then on Woodstock, and hey, there's a cameo from Shaggy from Scooby-Doo smoking a joint. Just a reminder that James Gunn wrote the live-action Scooby-Doo film, where Matthew Lillard played Shaggy. Then in Japan, where they're dressed in the classic samurai garb. And then at a punk show where Eric's shirt is the mighty Crabjoys. They knock each other out, and the bride is left in the rain, broken, laying beside Nina. The song during the credits is On pas till du dors by Kaiser's Orchestra. The song title means Dance Till You Die. I'm enjoying this show. I don't know if we'll be able to keep up with it every week, but at some point we will do a breakdown of all the Easter eggs in every episode. Again, we are watching the new DC universe unfold just in this animated form, so I think it's going to be important for us to watch it, and I'm excited. Huge thanks to Noah Chen and Brandon Barrick for helping research this breakdown. Comment down below with your thoughts on this show. Follow me at EA Voss and subscribe to all 3 channels in the new Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.